Jared Goff has signed a 4-year, $212 million contract extension, $170 million guaranteed, highest paid player in Lions franchise history. Duh. Couple things from this. I think your note here is very valid that we need to stop being surprised by this.
Yeah, this is just how it goes. I remember the first time you saw quarterbacks that you didn't think were the best in the game getting huge contracts.
Like Cousins.
Yeah, or even before that.
Yeah.
Where we look at that and we think to ourselves, wait, really? Ew, no. But this is just how it's done. Every single contract that is given out to a player, especially at the quarterback, is paving the way for the next bigger contract. So I would not personally want to be in the situation the Lions are, which is where you're successful. You made it to the NFC Championship game, and your quarterback's good enough, and has been to a Super Bowl before, for what it's worth. I wouldn't want to be in this position, but when you're in this position, what is the alternative? You're going to let him walk? You're going to move on from him?
You have no options.
And throw away whatever route you're on? Who knows if the Lions win a Super Bowl, Jared Goff? I would say it's unlikely, but yeah, you're in this situation, and every single contract for a quarterback gets bigger and bigger by the year.
Yeah, and then like the immediate response to this is, okay, so that means Jordan Love and Dak Prescott are going to be $60 million quarterbacks. I'd rather have Goff.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Love is probably going to be.
There's a lot of unknown with Love. We're talking about a couple of months sample size where all of a sudden
hard to
he was
say.
taking good steps forward. But right, it's 1 year with
$60 million
with Love and with Dak Prescott.
No.
I mean, if you're picking between Jared Goff and Dak Prescott, sadly, you're probably picking Jared Goff because with Dak, there are mistakes that are going to happen, and ultimately, do you win, even if he is a good quarterback?
So this offseason, the Lions have given up $444 million worth of contracts to Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Penei Sewell. So they've locked up 3 of their most important players. Your quarterback, your number 1 wide receiver, probably a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL, and then all-pro left tackle. So you've positioned yourself well to pay those guys. You've done a good job in the draft. We've seen what they did last year with Gibbs and Brian Branch and these guys coming in, having an impact right away. You think the Texans are... When do the Texans start to be like in these conversations?
It's an interesting question. I mean, right now, you look at everybody on the roster. CJ Stroud's the one guy that'll get a monster north of Jared Goff kind of deal when it's time.
He's going to make $70 million a year.
Probably. Maybe even more, honestly.
At least.
But when you look at the contracts that they've given out, Laramie Tunsil's really the biggest one of the Nick Caserio era. 3 years and 75 with 50 guaranteed. They haven't gone north of 100. Now, again, the total number versus how much is actually paid, 2 dramatically different things in the NFL. But we haven't seen Nick Caserio go this route before. And I am curious as to if he'll ever do that. I would look at Nico Collins right now as one of the candidates for a deal like Amon-Ra St. Brown or like a Penei Sewell. But we already have a guy on this roster that's in that same kind of conversation as Sewell, and they didn't give him that money, at least in total. So is this something that they will ever do? I wonder about it. It does feel like something the New England Patriots under Belichick with Caserio and with Brady, of course, it feels like something they would not have done, but in a different location and in a more modern NFL. Is that something that Caserio is ever going to be willing to do? Time will tell.
I think you have to.
But it hasn't happened yet. He has to. Interesting. Why?
I think you have to reward players on your team. I think it's a camaraderie thing. It's a reward for what you've done as a franchise. Like, of course you're going to pay CJ Stroud, right? Like, that's easy.
What if you have, though, CJ Stroud? I mean, if you're the Chiefs, do you have to pay anybody? If you're a team that had Tom Brady, did you have to pay anybody?
Well, the Chiefs pay people. I mean, Chris Jones is the highest paid defensive tackle in the NFL.
They didn't pay Tyreek Hill, and tight end is a position where you can kind of...
Kelsey's expensive, but like compared to most players, he's not super pricey, right?
I mean, as far as their offensive linemen go, I know that they've been rather aggressive in addressing that of late. I think Joe Tooney,
I think the advantage...
Bloom.
The advantage the Texans have is that when you look at the upcoming contracts that they have to hand out potentially to homegrown talent, it's Nico and it's Stingley. And then the next time you're talking about paying people is Christian Harris I think would be mathematically in that same area as Stingley. You could pay him. And then you're talking about Will Anderson and CJ Stroud and Tank Dell. Like everyone else is already under contract, not homegrown, or you've paid in some way, shape, or form. You've locked up Mixon. Your whole wide receiver room is not locked up besides Tank Dell. You're going to pay Nico or Diggs, I would imagine. Both are not going to walk. You've paid Dalton Schultz. You paid Laramie Tunsil. You paid Titus Howard. Scruggs, Mason, Fisher, Kenyon Green, whatever combo is, they're all under rookie contracts. None of those guys, well, at least Kenyon Green's obviously not going to get a second contract. Your defensive line, you signed all of them this offseason except for Will Anderson. So like that's where like the Texans are. Too. The Texans are in a little bit of a different position because they don't have as much homegrown talent as like the Lions do. Now, Goff's obviously not homegrown, but like this is his second big contract. They're his first with that team, and you're always going to pay your quarterback. So eventually, like there will be an offseason in which Tank Dell, CJ Stroud, and Will Anderson probably make $400 million, like $600 million actually. At the way
will they
the
all make it here?
Going.
I mean, will they all make it here? I wonder.
At least two of them will. Tank would be the one that I would say would not if I was going to have to call my shot.
I would probably feel the same way. Yeah. I mean, you got your defensive leader, you got your offensive leader.
They'll be Texans for life.
With Dell, look, we love what the Texans have at receiver right now, but this is why I said this offseason that wide receivers should not be at the top of everyone's wish list. When you got a guy like Stroud, you're going to be able to get away with more. And he might not be thrilled with it. And you might think, yeah, it would be better if he had more around him. But in a league where there's a salary cap and you have to pick where you give resources and where you ignore, Stroud allows you to ignore a lot. So, yeah, if I'm picking between those three, I would say that Dell's probably not the one getting the contract.
And the places that you would look to play or pay first and the positions that are the most valuable, it's quarterback for offense and pass rusher for defense, and that is your second and third pick from the 2023 NFL Draft. Boom, right there. They both won rookies of the year, and so part of it is like the positional thing. There's not a running back. They didn't use a pick on a star running back where it's, do you pay this guy? Do you pay Zeke Elliott? Do you pay Saquon Barkley? It's like they're all very clearly, if you have a stud young quarterback, pass rusher, even like corner when Stingley comes up. Like, all these guys play positions where it's not something where, well, teams can't win if you're paying an off-ball linebacker this much, or you're paying a safety this much, or you're paying a running back. They're all positions where it's like, nope, this is what smart teams will pay the premium for.
Yeah, Bucky Brooks from NFL.com and the NFL Network, he says that he always talks about the 4 Ps. So it's what? Pass throwers, pass catchers, pass rushers, pass defenders. And like that's what the Texans have. You have Nico Collins, who you should pay. You have Derek Stingley Jr., so assuming he's healthy through one full season, I think you definitely pay. You have Will Anderson, who you'll eventually pay, and you have CJ Stroud, who you'll eventually pay.
And you have Tunsil, who've already paid.
Yeah, and so the question marks, like in the future, will probably be more about Christian Harris and Tank Dell.
Well, Derek Stingley.
Yeah, I mean, if
Stingley's number one after those
healthy,
guys.
I think Stingley has to prove it on the field one more year.
I agree with that.
I think it's one more year. Then it becomes, if he's as good as he has been in the flashes. He played 10 games last year, 10 games last year. If he just does that for 16 games, boom.
Harris isn't getting that money. This is. If you take a look, I guess it's just the totem pole of who gets paid. It's quarterback way north of everybody.
Yes.
Then it's probably tied tackle and defensive end, defensive tackle. Then after that, wide receiver and slightly below that corner. And those are probably like the top 5 most expensive positions in the league. So Stingley is going to be the next real big question for them, unless they do give Nico Collins the kind of extension that you would give to a top 10 wide receiver. And that I also don't know about. I don't know what's going to happen this year, because with Collins, it's the same thing as with Stingley. It's one awesome year.
Yeah.
The years before that were frustrating at best. And again, he was a 3rd-round pick. It's not like you were expecting that much out of him, but Now you look at those years and you're like, damn, what the hell?
Yeah, the biggest reason why he wouldn't get paid for by the Texans would be if he has a down year, to your point, and Diggs goes off and they choose Diggs instead of Nico.
And I'd have a hard time believing that they do that too.
That would stun me.
I feel like Diggs is not really going to age well wherever he goes just because of his nature, which is a guy who has he has a high level of expectations.
Yeah.
And they have not been met in two places that were actually pretty good.